The pyramid that shouldn't exist. There are structures in this world that seem to whisper, not shout. They do not boast about their creators. They endure in silence, challenging time itself to explain them. And among all the relics of ancient Earth, one stands apart like a paradox written in stone, the Great Pyramid of Giza. For over 4,000 years, it has towered above the desert like a riddle made of granite and light. We are told it was built by Pharaoh Khufu around 2560 BC. Using primitive copper tools and ropes, we are told it took 20 years, 100,000 laborers, and a perfection that somehow no one ever repeated. We are told, but what if what we've been told is not the full story? Because there are signs, mathematical, geological, and astronomical, that whisper of something far older. Signs that suggest the pyramid was not built by the Egyptians, but inherited by them. That when Khufu came to power, the Great Pyramid was already standing, a relic from a forgotten epoch. It's an idea most archaeologists dismiss outright. Yet the deeper we look, the more the evidence seems to resist the traditional narrative. The erosion patterns, the orientation to true north, the impossible engineering tolerances, each element seems to say, we were here before you. Standing at the edge of the Giza Plateau, you can feel it, that tension between science and myth, between what is taught and what is remembered, between civilization and something that might have come before civilization. The desert holds its breath. The sun, low and merciless, paints the pyramid gold. And in that moment, you can't help but wonder, did the Egyptians really build this, or did they discover it? To begin answering that question, we must travel back to a time before Egypt had a name, to an age erased by sand and flood, to a world that existed, perhaps, before the dawn of history itself. Because if the Great Pyramid was inherited, then everything we think we know about the rise of human civilization must be rewritten. But to see that truth, we must first unlearn everything we've been told. Zep Tepi, the time before the Nile carved its path, before the pharaohs wore crowns, and before the stars were charted on temple ceilings, the ancient Egyptians spoke of an age they called Zep Tepi, the first time. To the priests of Heliopolis, this was not myth. It was history, forgotten history. It was the age when gods ruled upon the earth, not as celestial abstractions, but as beings of flesh and wisdom. Thoth, Osiris, and Isis, Ptah, Ra, and Horus. They were said to have brought the knowledge of architecture, geometry, astronomy, and perhaps something even greater, the art of transcendence through structure. When Egyptologists first translated these accounts, they dismissed them as religious allegory. But hidden in the symbolism are clues that may refer to a real pre-dynastic civilization, one that vanished long before the Nile Valley became a cradle of dynasties. A civilization that could explain why the earliest Egyptian monuments suddenly appear with staggering perfection, as if mastery had been inherited, not learned. The myth of Zep Tepi tells of a cataclysm, a deluge that ended the rule of the gods. After the flood, survivors emerged from a land to the west, bringing with them the knowledge of the heavens. They were the followers of Horus, the Shemsu-Hor, beings described as semi-divine, who guided the first kings of Egypt. To many scholars, this is just mythological language, but to others, including independent researchers and some geologists, Zep Tepi could preserve a dim echo of an advanced culture lost at the end of the last ice age. Around 12,000 years ago, when the planet suffered massive climatic upheavals, the melting of the ice sheets, the sudden rise of sea levels, and the onset of global floods, all events confirmed by modern science. And so the question emerges, if such a civilization did exist, if survivors truly brought their knowledge into Egypt, could they have been the original builders of the Great Pyramid? The notion may sound fantastical, but it aligns eerily with the timeline of another controversial structure, the Sphinx. Geologist Robert Schoch's studies of weathering patterns suggest that the Sphinx shows evidence of water erosion, not wind, implying it predates the desert itself, possibly dating back to that same post-Ice Age period. If the Sphinx predates dynastic Egypt, could the pyramid beside it also be far older than we think? This would mean that by the time Khufu reigned, the monument already stood as an ancient relic, its original purpose lost, its builders forgotten. Khufu may have merely claimed it, repaired it, and left his name to history as its builder, just as conquerors have done with monuments throughout time. In the temples of Edfu, hieroglyphs describe the island of creation and the great houses built by the gods in the first time. Could these great houses refer to the pyramids themselves, sacred machines from Zep Tepi, preserved through flood and sand? Mainstream Egyptology sees no evidence of a lost age, insisting on a steady local development of technology. But if you stand beneath the limestone mass of the Great Pyramid, feeling its precision and scale, it's hard to believe it was the first of its kind. It feels like the culmination of something much older, a legacy, not a beginning. Perhaps that is what Zep Tepi truly means. Not a literal first time, but the memory of a forgotten civilization whose fingerprints still mark the stones of Giza. And if that is true, then the Great Pyramid is not just a tomb, nor a symbol of power. It is a message, a remnant from those who lived through the cataclysm, a monument designed to outlast time itself. But to understand what that message might be, we must look closer at the pyramid itself and at the secrets hidden within its stones. Stones of two ages. The Great Pyramid looks timeless, as if it had been carved from a single mountain and simply revealed by the desert wind. Yet under the surface of that illusion, the stones tell a story, one of two eras intertwined. Archaeologists often describe the pyramid's construction as a uniform feat, planned and executed by Khufu's engineers. But when geologists and independent architects began examining the structure up close, they noticed something extraordinary. Not all the stones match. At the base of the Great Pyramid, the limestone blocks are enormous, some weighing over 70 tons, roughly cut, but placed with uncanny precision. Higher up, the blocks become smaller, lighter, and more uniform, as if produced under a different method or even a different age. The foundation stones appear to have been weathered long before the upper courses were set in place. Erosion lines cut horizontally across them, suggesting they were exposed to the elements for centuries, perhaps millennia, before being enclosed within the finished pyramid. In other words, the lower structure might predate the rest. This layered architecture mirrors what we see in other ancient sites, like the Temple of Luxor, Machu Picchu, and even the walls of Cusco in Peru, where massive megalithic blocks form the base, and later civilizations added their own smaller stones atop. It's as if each culture built upon a relic it could not replicate, attempting to imitate something it only half understood. Was the Great Pyramid the same? A restoration project on a monument already ancient when the pharaohs ruled? Inside the pyramid, the enigma deepens. The so-called King's Chamber is built from massive red granite blocks quarried from Aswan, some 500 miles away. Each weighs around 70 tons, and they are fitted with a precision modern engineers find difficult to explain. Yet in other chambers, the workmanship is far less exact, as though the builders were working around an existing framework rather than creating a new one. Even the passages are inconsistent. Perfectly straight corridors abruptly transition into rough-hewn tunnels, as if two construction phases overlapped. One polished, calculated, geometrically pure, the other practical, almost desperate, trying to connect new pathways through older architecture. Could this explain why no inscriptions describing the pyramid's construction exist anywhere inside it? Every temple, every tomb in Egypt is filled with carvings celebrating the pharaoh's deeds, except the Great Pyramid. It stands utterly silent. No murals, no hieroglyphs, nothing. Khufu's name appears only once, scratched hastily in red paint on an inner relieving chamber discovered in 1837 by Colonel Howard Vyse. But even that is contested. Some researchers argue the mark was a later addition, perhaps even a 19th century forgery meant to support the prevailing theory that Khufu built the pyramid. If true, then what we have is not a monument built by Khufu, but one he inherited, repaired, and claimed. The upper layers, smaller, younger, and less eroded, could have been his contribution. The core, massive, weathered, and perfect, might belong to another world entirely, and perhaps this duality explains something deeper. Why the pyramid's geometry encodes knowledge far beyond the capabilities of any known Bronze Age society. Its base perimeter divided by twice its height equals pi 3.1416, accurate to the fourth decimal. Its slope corresponds to the golden ratio, phi. Its alignment to true north is within 3/60ths of a degree, more precise than any modern building until the 20th century. These are not coincidences. They are signatures, mathematical fingerprints of a design philosophy alien to the time of Khufu. If the Great Pyramid truly contains stones of two ages, then it may represent not one act of creation, but a continuum of civilizations, one remembering, one rebuilding, one reaching back towards something it could barely comprehend. And somewhere within that continuum lies the first undeniable clue, that the pyramid's foundation might be far older than dynastic Egypt itself. But the stones are only the beginning. To confirm inheritance, we must look deeper, beneath the ground, where time itself still guards the truth, the hidden chambers beneath. If the Great Pyramid was inherited, then the truth may not be found in the stones above ground, but in the darkness below. Because beneath the Giza Plateau lies a labyrinth older than the pharaohs, a network of tunnels and chambers whose existence challenges everything we think we know about ancient Egypt. For centuries, stories have circulated among locals of hidden caverns under the pyramids, passages sealed by floods or sand, leading deep into the earth. Ancient Greek historians like Herodotus and Strabo both wrote of vast underground halls, describing a great chamber beneath the pyramid, surrounded by water where the body of Khufu rests. When modern archaeologists began their surveys, they assumed these were just myths. But as technology advanced, something unexpected happened. In the late 20th century, ground-penetrating radar and microgravity scans revealed large, unexplored voids beneath and within the Great Pyramid. Cavities so precisely geometric they could not be natural formations. In 2017, the Scan Pyramids project confirmed a massive hidden space above the Grand Gallery, dubbed the Big Void, an empty corridor nearly 100 feet long, undisturbed for 4,000 years. But while most eyes turned upward, some researchers began asking a different question. What lies beneath? Egypt's earliest known records, the pyramid texts of Saqqara, speak of the paths below, gates of the earth, and chambers of the primeval gods. In 1993, German engineer Rudolf Gantenbrink sent a robotic probe, Upuaut-2, into the narrow shafts of the Great Pyramid, discovering sealed doors with copper fittings, as though the passages were intentionally blocked to guard something deeper. Even earlier, in 1954, workers clearing sand near the Great Pyramid stumbled upon a pit containing a perfectly preserved wooden boat, the Khufu Solar Barge. The discovery shocked archaeologists. The boat had been buried in a subterranean chamber, sealed by 40-ton limestone slabs. Its purpose remains uncertain, but its presence proves that large hidden chambers were indeed constructed beneath the monument, chambers untouched since antiquity. And yet, despite these finds, official exploration of the underground remains restricted. Beneath the Sphinx, seismic studies by Thomas DeBecke and John Anthony West in the 1990s revealed another anomaly, a rectangular chamber directly between the Sphinx's paws, connected to what appears to be a tunnel leading toward the Great Pyramid. The Egyptian authorities denied entry, and to this day, no one outside their circle knows what lies inside. Could these underground systems predate the pyramids themselves? Some geologists believe the tunnels may follow ancient fissures in the limestone bedrock, widened and shaped by human hands in pre-dynastic times? If so, they could be remnants of an earlier civilization, one that sought refuge underground after the cataclysmic floods remembered as the first time. Imagine it, an ancient people, watching the skies darken as the ice melted and the seas rose, building sanctuaries beneath the plateau. When the world calmed, their descendants resurfaced, finding their own monuments already standing above them, relics of their ancestors. Perhaps that is why the Egyptians always built on top of sacred ground. They weren't just constructing tombs, they were marking places already revered, already charged with myth. And it is within this context that the Great Pyramid's underworld takes on new meaning. Because if the foundations of the pyramid predate Khufu, and if the tunnels beneath it predate even the dynasties, then Giza may be the oldest continuously sacred site on Earth, a place inherited again and again, each civilization layering its memory upon the last. Yet what purpose did these hidden chambers serve? Were they tombs, or something else entirely? Some believe they were energy chambers, designed to store or amplify vibrations, using the pyramid's geometry to resonate with Earth's natural frequencies. Others see them as records vaults, preserving the knowledge of a lost age until humanity was ready to rediscover it. In either case, the implication remains staggering. The true builders may have intended the Great Pyramid not as a monument to death, but as a machine for preservation, of spirit, of knowledge, or of civilization itself. And if that's true, then perhaps the greatest secrets of Giza do not lie above ground at all, but still sleep in the dark, waiting for us to remember. The geometry of the gods. For centuries, the Great Pyramid has been studied as a physical structure, an achievement of engineering, logistics, and brute labor. But when one looks closer, past the limestone and granite, a deeper pattern emerges. The pyramid is not merely built, it is coded. Every angle, every ratio, every alignment seems to express a form of mathematical intelligence, one that transcends the era of its supposed construction. It's as if the pyramid was designed to communicate through geometry, a message written not in words but in universal constants. When measured precisely, the Great Pyramid encodes values that modern mathematicians associate with the fabric of the cosmos itself. Its base perimeter divided by twice its height equals p, 3.4 10 to 16, to extraordinary precision. Its height to half its base equals the golden ratio, f, 1:6:18. Its sides are aligned to true north with an accuracy within 3/60ths of a degree, a feat that would challenge even modern surveyors without GPS. These alignments are not decorative. They form a system, a harmonic geometry, where proportions reflect celestial and planetary measurements. The pyramid's height, for instance, multiplied by 43,200 equals the polar radius of the Earth in modern miles. Its base perimeter, multiplied by the same number, equals Earth's circumference. These numbers aren't arbitrary. They encode a scale model of our planet, as if the builders possessed knowledge of Earth's exact dimensions long before modern science rediscovered them. How could a Bronze Age civilization have achieved this? How could workers using copper chisels and rope align millions of stones to true north more accurately than the Paris Observatory? Traditional Egyptology answers simply, they were remarkably skilled. But others, mathematicians, architects, and independent scholars, suggest a deeper possibility, that the pyramid was designed not as a tomb, but as a mathematical instrument, a structure that harmonizes with the geometry of the Earth, the Sun, and the stars. Consider this. The slope angle of the Great Pyramid, 54 further 51 n, encodes the ratio of the circle to the square, the ancient quest to square the circle, symbolizing the unity of heaven and earth. The same principle appears in sacred architecture across cultures, from Stonehenge to Teotihuacan, from Angkor to the Mayan pyramids. all reflect a common mathematical grammar, as if each civilization inherited fragments of the same lost equation. Could the Great Pyramid be the source of that inheritance? The original template of sacred geometry? Even the internal architecture seems to follow this cosmic code. The king's chamber, built of red granite, resonates at 440 Hz, the same frequency as the musical note A, the modern tuning standard for orchestras. Was this coincidence, or was the chamber intentionally tuned to vibrate with the Earth's natural resonance, known as the Schumann frequency? Some acoustic engineers believe so. When sound waves bounce within the granite box known as the sarcophagus, the chamber amplifies them, creating a deep, sustained tone, as though the structure itself were alive, singing in stone. Ancient Egyptian priests called their temples Per-Netjer, house of the god. But perhaps the pyramid was not a house for the gods, but a house built in the language of the gods: geometry, vibration, light. A monument designed not to glorify a ruler but to preserve a principle, that the universe is built upon harmony. If so, the Great Pyramid may not be an anomaly, but a surviving artifact of a pre-dynastic science that viewed the cosmos as a living system and sought to mirror its order in stone. This perspective transforms everything. The Great Pyramid becomes a bridge between heaven and earth, matter and spirit, time and eternity. It stands as a mathematical fossil, carrying in its proportions the fingerprints of an intelligence that saw beyond borders and eras. But if that intelligence truly predated Egypt, where did it come from? Was it born along the Nile, or carried there, preserved like sacred knowledge after the fall of an earlier world? To answer that, we must look outward, beyond Egypt, to see if similar patterns appear elsewhere. Because if the same cosmic language is found across the globe, then we are not just talking about one inherited monument, but a worldwide legacy. And that legacy might trace back to a single, forgotten source. Echoes across the world. The Great Pyramid of Giza stands alone in the desert, yet it is not alone in the world. Across distant lands and separated continents, other monuments rise that mirror its design, its mathematics, and its mystery. They share no known cultural contact, no common language, and yet they speak the same geometric tongue. From the jungles of Central America to the highlands of China, from the Andes to the forgotten plains of Indonesia, the same sacred shape appears: the pyramid. Was this coincidence, or evidence of a lost legacy spread long before recorded history began? Let's start half a world away in Teotihuacan, Mexico, the city of the gods. Long before the Aztecs arrived, they found the city already ancient, abandoned, and perfectly aligned with the stars. They named it Teotihuacan because they believed it was where men became gods. Its central monument, the Pyramid of the Sun, shares almost the exact base dimensions as the Great Pyramid of Giza, within less than 1%. Even more striking, its layout mirrors the Pleiades constellation, an alignment also encoded in Egyptian temples. When measured, Teotihuacan's main avenue, the Avenue of the Dead, points 15.5 degrees east of north, matching Giza's layout when adjusted for precession. How could two civilizations, separated by thousands of miles and thousands of years, design cities using nearly identical astronomical frameworks? Travel east to China's Shanxi province, where hundreds of ancient pyramids rise beneath farmland and forest, massive mounds of clay and stone, many sealed and forbidden to excavation. Some Chinese records attribute them to the earliest dynasties, but others hint at rulers from before the time of the Yellow Emperor. Their alignments to true north and the cardinal points, measured by satellite imagery, match the precision of Giza. Several even share the same slope angles, 51, corresponding to the golden ratio. The same ratio, the same cosmic constant, again and again and again. Farther south in Indonesia, the mysterious site of Gunung Padang challenges every accepted timeline. Beneath the surface of what was thought to be a natural hill, ground-penetrating radar revealed multiple man-made terraces, layers upon layers of basalt columns arranged in a stepped pyramid formation. Carbon dating from the lowest levels returned results older than 20,000 years, shattering the timeline of human civilization as we know it. Archaeologists resist the implications, but if even part of that dating holds true, then Gunung Padang would predate Sumer, Egypt, and even the end of the Ice Age. And then there are the Andes, where the Incas too built upon older foundations. At Sacsayhuaman and Ollantaytambo, stones weighing over 100 tons are carved and fitted with surgical precision, much like the lower blocks of Giza. Beneath them lie older, eroded levels that seem to belong to an unknown culture, one the Incas themselves said came before them. Everywhere we look, the same pattern emerges. Great monuments of impossible precision, standing atop older ruins, each inheriting from a civilization that came before. It's as if Earth itself bears the ruins of a single forgotten blueprint, fragments of an older global order that once spanned the planet, an order that spoke through geometry, through stone, through silence. Mainstream archaeology explains these parallels as convergent evolution, different cultures discovering similar solutions to similar challenges. But is that enough to explain identical angles, astronomical orientations, and mathematical constants encoded independently across continents? Perhaps the answer lies not in isolated development, but in shared memory, a legacy carried by survivors of a global cataclysm who rebuilt their knowledge wherever they landed. They may have remembered fragments of the old science, geometry as sacred, alignment as divine, the pyramid as a bridge between heaven and earth. If so, the Great Pyramid of Giza wasn't the beginning of something. It was the continuation, a restoration of an ancient template that once united the world. And if that's true, then Giza's builders didn't invent its perfection. They remembered it. They preserved what had been lost. And in doing so, they left behind the greatest clue of all, that humanity's story did not begin with Egypt or Sumer, but with something far older, stretching back to a time when our ancestors still walked among the shadows of gods. But to trace that forgotten age, we must turn to the sky, for the stars remember what the earth has forgotten, the star blueprint. Every civilization that ever looked to the heavens found stories there. But for the builders of the Great Pyramid, the stars were not just symbols, they were coordinates. The pyramid is not randomly placed, nor is it merely a tomb. It is part of a cosmic design, a reflection of the sky as it appeared in an age long before Egypt's first kings. The ancients called it as above, so below. What was in the heavens was mirrored upon the earth, and nowhere is that principle more perfectly realized than on the Giza Plateau. The three great pyramids of Giza, Khufu, Khafra, and Menkaura, form a pattern that precisely matches the three stars of Orion's belt, Al-Nitak, Al-Nilam, and Mintaka. The alignment is so exact that the offset of the smallest pyramid mirrors the offset of Mintaka, a detail invisible without precise observation. This is not symbolic artistry, it's astronomical mapping in stone. But there's something even more extraordinary. When the stars of Orion's belt are positioned directly above the pyramids, the pattern corresponds not to the sky of 2500 BC, but to the sky of 10,500 BC, nearly 8,000 years earlier. That's the date when the constellation of Orion would have appeared in that exact orientation relative to the horizon at Giza. Coincidence? Perhaps. But the same epoch, 10,500 BC, also marks the rising of Leo in the east, the celestial counterpart to the Sphinx, which faces precisely toward the point of sunrise on the spring equinox. In that remote era, the Sphinx would have faced its celestial twin, the constellation Leo, as it rose with the dawn. It is as if the entire Giza complex, pyramids and Sphinx alike, were designed to mark a specific moment in cosmic time, frozen in architecture. The idea that the pyramids encode star alignments was popularized by engineer Robert Bauval in the 1990s. His Orion correlation theory was controversial, yet the data speaks for itself. The layout, the angles, the astronomical precision all point to a deliberate connection between Earth and sky, between human structure and celestial order. But what was the purpose of this cosmic alignment? To the Egyptians, Orion was Osiris, the god of resurrection, of death and rebirth. The Milky Way represented the heavenly Nile, flowing through eternity. When the pharaoh died, his soul was said to travel through Orion to join the gods among the stars. Thus, the pyramids were not merely tombs, they were portals, designed to align with the cosmic gateways of the soul. Yet if the alignments trace back to 10500 BC, long before Egypt's dynasties, then this portal was not built for Khufu or his successors. It was built for someone or something far older. Could it be that the original builders of Giza constructed the site as a celestial clock, marking the beginning of a great precessional cycle, a 26,000-year rotation of the Earth's axis? If so, the Great Pyramid might stand as a timestamp of that epoch, a message to future civilizations saying, "We were here when the cycle began." And if that's true, then we are nearing the end of that same cycle now. As the stars return to their ancient positions, humanity may once again be approaching a turning point, one the builders of Giza foresaw and sought to immortalize in stone. It's a staggering thought that the Great Pyramid is not a tomb, but a cosmic monument, designed to bridge ages and civilizations through celestial memory. The precision of its placement supports this idea. The pyramid sits at the geographical center of Earth's landmass, not by accident but by design. It aligns to true north more accurately than any other ancient structure, and its meridian divides the planet's land into nearly equal halves, east and west. How could anyone have known this without a global map or a perspective from above? Unless, of course, the knowledge was inherited from those who did. And so, through its orientation, geometry, and astronomy, the Great Pyramid seems to encode a truth older than dynastic Egypt, that its builders saw themselves as participants in a grand celestial order. They built not just for themselves, but for time itself. The heavens were their blueprints, the earth was their canvas, and somewhere between the stars and the sand, the secret of their inheritance still waits to be understood. But to truly grasp what they knew, we must understand what they measured, the science that connected the pyramid's geometry to the motion of the earth itself. Encoded in stone, the science of the ancients. If the Great Pyramid truly comes from a forgotten age, then its stones must bear the fingerprints of knowledge beyond its supposed time, knowledge of mathematics, physics, and geodesy that no Bronze Age society should have possessed. And that is precisely what the evidence suggests. When early surveyors like Sir Flinders Petrie began measuring the pyramid in the 19th century, they were astonished by its mathematical precision. The dimensions were not random. They were deliberate, chosen to encode relationships between Earth, time, and the cosmos. The pyramid's base length, 755.75 feet, multiplied by 4 for all sides, gives 3,023 feet. Divide that by twice its height, 481.25 feet, and you get 3.1416, the value of pi to 4 decimal places. Was this an accident? Unlikely. The ratio between its height and half its base gives 1.618. Phi, the golden ratio, found throughout nature, from the spiral of galaxies to the shell of a nautilus. Its base perimeter multiplied by 43,200, a number corresponding to the precessional movement of Earth, equals the circumference of the planet. Its height multiplied by the same number equals the polar radius of Earth. The pyramid, in essence, is a scale model of the Earth, constructed with a level of geodetic knowledge not officially rediscovered until the 18th century. How could Khufu's engineers have known the true shape and size of the planet? Knowledge that required advanced surveying, long-distance navigation, and trigonometry. Even stranger, the Great Pyramid's location itself is significant. It sits almost exactly at 30° north latitude on the line dividing the Earth's landmass into nearly equal northern and southern portions. It also lies at the point where the longest line of latitude and the longest line of longitude intersect, a natural zero point of global geometry. It is the center of the world's land, a perfect meridian marker. This cannot be coincidence. Whoever placed the pyramid here did so with an understanding of the planet's geometry, a perspective that seems almost aerial, as if mapped from above. But there's more. Inside the pyramid, the proportions of the passageways and chambers mirror not only geometric ratios but also astronomical cycles. The ascending passage, for example, rises at 26 degrees, the same number of degrees representing the tilt of Earth's axis. The Grand Gallery's length encodes the number of days in a solar year, while the King's Chamber embodies the ratio of the Earth to the Moon. Even the pyramid's orientation, almost perfectly aligned with true north, suggests the use of stellar or solar navigation techniques far beyond simple observation. The alignment is more precise than anything built for thousands of years afterward. All this implies one of two possibilities. Either the Egyptians made an unprecedented leap in science that was then completely lost for millennia, or they inherited the knowledge from those who came before. If that's true, then the Great Pyramid was never merely a tomb. It was a repository of universal constants, a monument encoding the fundamental laws of creation. The ancient Egyptian word for the pyramid was Mer, meaning place of ascension. In that context, perhaps its function was not only spiritual but scientific, a machine that embodied the mathematics of the cosmos, bridging heaven and earth through harmonic geometry. And it may not have stood alone. The smaller pyramids of Giza seem to form a resonant field, each calibrated to interact with the others, forming a triadic system of energy and alignment. Modern acoustic studies suggest that the Great Pyramid acts as a resonator capable of amplifying electromagnetic frequencies within its chambers. When stimulated by natural vibrations, such as the Earth's own resonance, it could have produced standing waves of energy, what physicists call resonant coupling. To the ancients, that might not have been physics. It was sacred science, the knowledge of how matter and spirit could harmonize. If these principles were inherited, they may represent a fragment of a forgotten global science, one that viewed energy, geometry, and consciousness as parts of the same system. The Great Pyramid, then, becomes a vessel, not for a king's body, but for the memory of a vanished science. But if the builders encoded knowledge of the Earth and cosmos in its design, one question remains. What happened to them? Who were they, and why did their knowledge vanish? The stones preserve their mathematics. The myths preserve their memory, but their identity, their civilization, remains a mystery. To uncover who they were, we must follow the trail back to the edge of the last great flood, to the dawn after catastrophe, when survivors may have carried the knowledge of the gods into a new world. The memory of Atlantis. Long before the pyramids, before Sumer and the first cities of man, ancient stories spoke of a world that vanished beneath the sea, a world of astonishing knowledge and divine architecture. The Greeks called it Atlantis. For most, Atlantis is a myth, a parable told by Plato in Timaeus and Critias. He described it as a vast island empire beyond the Pillars of Heracles, the Strait of Gibraltar, that ruled over lands as far as Egypt and Italy. It was a civilization blessed with advanced science, powerful fleets, and temples of gold and orichalcum. And then, in a single day and night of misfortune, the island sank beneath the waves. Plato claimed this was no invention. He said his ancestor Solon learned of Atlantis from Egyptian priests at Sai, who told him, "You Greeks are like children. You have no memory of what came before." The priests spoke of a cataclysm that struck 9,000 years before Solon, around 11600 BC, the very end of the last ice age, when global sea levels rose and the planet convulsed under massive climate upheavals. That date is no coincidence. Modern geology recognizes that same period as the Younger Dryas boundary, a sudden, devastating event marked by floods, fires, and mass extinctions. Evidence of cometary impacts and abrupt melting across the northern hemisphere supports what ancient myths preserved as memory, that a world ended in fire and water. Could that have been the fall of the civilization that built or inspired the Great Pyramid? If Atlantis existed, its survivors would have sought refuge on higher ground. The Nile Valley, newly fertile after the floodwaters receded, would have been a natural haven. The Egyptian priests who told Solon the story may have been the descendants of those survivors, keepers of an inherited legacy, the last guardians of an older science. Even the name Atlantis echoes through Egyptian cosmology. The temple inscriptions of Edfu describe a primordial island destroyed by flood, where the gods once lived and where they built the great houses of eternity. These houses were said to be rebuilt in Egypt after the deluge, using fragments of the first plans. The parallels are uncanny. An island destroyed by water, survivors who rebuild, a knowledge preserved through geometry and stone. Across cultures, the story repeats. The Sumerians wrote of Eridu, the first city before the flood, founded by gods who came by sea. The Maya remembered Aztlan, a shining land that sank beneath the ocean. The Indians spoke of Dwarka and Kumari Kandam, lost to rising tides. The Celts sang of Ys and Lyonesse, drowned beneath the western waves. Different names, same memory, a world destroyed, and knowledge carried forward by the few who survived. If even a fragment of truth lies behind these legends, then the Great Pyramid may stand as the child of Atlantis, not built by its citizens directly, but by those who remembered them, a monument to preserve what the flood erased. The geological record supports this possibility. Around 12,000 years ago, sea levels rose by over 400 feet, submerging coastal plains that could have hosted vast cities now hidden beneath the ocean. Sonar surveys off the coasts of Cuba, Japan, and India have revealed what appear to be submerged megalithic structures, massive stone blocks arranged in deliberate formations, eerily reminiscent of pre-dynastic architecture. These findings remain controversial, but the pattern persists. Ancient sites, older than accepted history allows, each pointing to a forgotten age of mastery. If Atlantis was real, even metaphorically, it represents the mother civilization, the seedbed from which later cultures sprouted. Egypt, Sumer, the Indus Valley, all may have inherited fragments of its science, its astronomy, its sacred geometry. Perhaps that is what the Great Pyramid truly is, a survivor's message written in stone so that when the next cycle of destruction came, humanity might remember. A monument built not for a king, but for civilization itself. In that sense, Atlantis was never just a place. It was an idea, a symbol of the unity between humanity and the cosmos, an age when knowledge and spirituality were one. The flood ended that age. The sands buried its memory, but its legacy endured, encoded in the geometry of the Great Pyramid, waiting for us to rediscover it. And if that's true, then Giza is not the end of a story. It's the beginning of a remembrance. But remembrance requires evidence, tangible proof that the timeline of civilization is older than we've been told. And that evidence lies scattered across the world in stones that predate recorded history. The forgotten builders, proof from the deep past. If the Great Pyramid was inherited, it would not stand alone as evidence of a lost civilization. Other sites, scattered across continents, whisper the same impossible story. Humanity is far older and far more advanced than history allows. For decades, archaeologists clung to a familiar timeline. Civilization began around 5,000 years ago, with the rise of writing, agriculture, and the first cities. But discoveries of the last 30 years have begun to dismantle that narrative, one buried stone at a time. The most striking of all lies in southern Turkey, beneath rolling hills near the town of Şanlıurfa. There, in 1994, a Kurdish farmer's plow struck stone and revealed a site that would change archaeology forever. Göbekli Tepe. Radiocarbon dating places its construction around 9600 BC, 7,000 years before the Great Pyramid, and centuries before the supposed invention of the wheel, metal tools, or agriculture. Yet what stands there defies explanation. Massive T-shaped pillars weighing up to 20 tons, carved with intricate reliefs of animals, celestial symbols, and abstract geometries. The pillars form perfect circles and align with star positions. Who built Göbekli Tepe? Officially, it was hunter-gatherers, nomadic tribes with no cities or writing. But how could such people have designed and assembled a megalithic temple complex using ton-weight stones and mathematical precision? Even stranger, Göbekli Tepe was deliberately buried around 8,000 BC, as if its builders wanted to protect it from something or someone. It's as though the site was a time capsule, sealed against a coming cataclysm. Its existence alone rewrites history. Advanced architecture existed thousands of years before Egypt, which means the knowledge behind the Great Pyramid could have roots not in dynastic Egypt, but in a prehistoric world that survived the cataclysm and rebuilt. And Göbekli Tepe is not alone. Across the Mediterranean, in Malta, massive megalithic temples such as Gantija and Hagar Kim rise from the rock, older than Stonehenge, their blocks arranged in perfect alignment with the solstices. Local legends claim they were built by giants, a recurring myth worldwide that may recall a vanished race of master builders. In Peru, the ruins of Pumapunku astonish engineers to this day. Precision-cut diorite blocks, some weighing over 100 tons, fit together like pieces of a 3D jigsaw. Their flatness and interlocking grooves seem almost machined. The Incas, when asked about them, said simply, "We did not build these. They were here before us." In Lebanon, the Temple of Baalbek rests upon foundation stones weighing up to 200 tons, the largest known megaliths on Earth. Modern cranes could barely move them, yet they were placed with exact precision long before the Romans ever arrived to build upon them. Everywhere we look, the same pattern emerges: immense stonework, perfect alignments, inexplicable engineering, and the same admission by later cultures. We inherited this. If these sites are the scattered remains of a global civilization, fragments of an Atlantean or pre-Ice Age world, then Egypt's Great Pyramid was not a sudden miracle of invention. It was the continuation of an ancient blueprint, a resurrection of techniques and symbols preserved through oral tradition, myth, and memory. The very name Giza may even echo this lineage. Some esoteric scholars suggest it derives from an ancient root meaning border or passage. Perhaps the plateau was chosen because it was already sacred, already known to those who had once mapped the world in stone. Göbekli Tepe, Pumapunku, Baalbek, they are all whispers of an earlier epoch, each buried, eroded, or repurposed by younger hands. And like the Great Pyramid, they suggest a continuity of knowledge rather than a sudden emergence of genius. If so, our entire understanding of human history is off by millennia. Civilization did not begin in Egypt. It reawakened there, carrying the inherited memory of a lost science that once spanned the earth. But how could such knowledge survive a global cataclysm? How could survivors of flood and fire preserve mathematical laws, architectural techniques, or the memory of celestial cycles? The answer may lie in the one element that endures when all else is destroyed: stone. The ancients may have built in stone not just for durability, but as a language, one that transcends speech and survives cataclysm. Geometry, after all, is universal, and the pyramid is its purest sentence, which means that every megalith on Earth, from Göbekli Tepe to Giza, could be part of a message written across epochs, waiting for us to read. But to understand that message, we must look beyond archaeology to the myths and texts that survived the flood, for they may preserve the memory of the ones who built before the dawn. The gods who remembered long before pharaohs ruled and kings recorded their names in stone. The world's first civilizations spoke of those who came before, not as myths, but as teachers. The Sumerians, the Egyptians, the Maya, the Hopi, each remembered an age when the gods themselves walked the earth. But what if gods was not a word for immortals, but for survivors? Beings who remembered the knowledge of a world that perished and brought it to a new dawn. In Sumer, the world's oldest recorded civilization, the gods were the Anunnaki, those who came from the heavens. They were said to have descended after a great flood, teaching humanity agriculture, mathematics, astronomy, and writing. The first city, Eridu, was built by them, and the earliest kings received their power from heaven. To scholars, these stories are mythology, but they echo something deeper, a recollection of a civilizing force, not born of local invention, but of inheritance. In Egypt, the same pattern emerges. The earliest texts, carved in the walls of Saqqara and Edfu, tell of the Shemsu Hor, the followers of Horus, divine beings who ruled Egypt after a great catastrophe. They built the great houses of the gods, the pyramids, and restored order to the land. Egyptian kings later claimed descent from them, calling themselves the last link in a chain that reached back to Zep Tepi the first time. Even the Maya spoke of their ancestors being guided by wise men from across the sea who arrived after a flood, bringing the calendar, the stars, and sacred mathematics. The Inca told of Viracocha, a bearded god dressed in white who came from the Pacific after the world was destroyed, rebuilding civilization before vanishing into the West. These are not isolated legends. They are fragments of a single global story, a memory shared by every ancient culture, a cataclysm, followed by the arrival of gods bearing lost wisdom. But who were they really? Some believe they were remnants of the Atlantean world, survivors of the Great Deluge, carrying fragments of their technology and knowledge to distant lands. Others suggest they may have been the last of a prehistoric high civilization, one that had mastered astronomy and engineering, not through divine magic, but through science we no longer understand. Whatever their identity, their influence was profound. In every case, civilization reappears suddenly, fully formed, as though remembered, not invented. Agriculture, writing, monumental architecture, all arise without gradual evolution. Humanity seems to wake up one day with memory intact, as if guided by unseen hands. Could these gods have been the original builders or teachers of the Great Pyramid, or at least the bearers of its design? The symbolism of the pyramid itself supports this possibility. To the Egyptians, the pyramid was not just a tomb, it was a stairway to the stars. The Benben, the primeval mound upon which creation began. The Benben stone was said to have descended from heaven, radiating light, a symbol of divine knowledge fallen to earth. Perhaps the Great Pyramid was an attempt to recreate that celestial form, not as worship, but as remembrance, a monument built in honor of those who brought back the light of knowledge after the flood. Even the word pyramid may hide this echo. In Greek, pyra means fire, and meidos means measure, the measure of fire, a fitting name for a structure that encodes the geometry of light itself. To the ancients, light and knowledge were the same thing. The gods brought both. If these beings truly existed, whether advanced humans, ancient scientists, or something beyond, their influence would have left a trail in myths, artifacts, and alignments. The Great Pyramid could have been one of many monuments built according to their sacred geometry, a cosmic signature scattered across the world, but if they came from a destroyed civilization, they would have known how fragile the earth could be. Perhaps they built in stone to warn us, or to ensure that their knowledge could survive the next cataclysm. Their message may not have been about power, but preservation. And in that sense, the Great Pyramid is not just a relic, it's a vault, a time capsule, a bridge across cycles of destruction and rebirth. Yet there's another, more unsettling question. If these gods were the inheritors of a lost world, what destroyed that world? Because the evidence of catastrophe is written everywhere, in myths, in geology, and perhaps even in the very erosion that scars the body of the Sphinx. The Great Cataclysm. Every civilization remembers a flood. From the Book of Genesis to the Epic of Gilgamesh, from the Popol Vuh of the Maya to the legends of the Hopi and Aboriginal Australians, the story is the same. A world destroyed by water, survivors clinging to mountains or arcs, and the dawn of a new humanity rising from the mud. For centuries, these were thought to be allegories, but geology now tells a different story, one that eerily matches the myths. Around 12,800 years ago, Earth entered a period of sudden, violent change known as the Younger Dryas. Global temperatures plummeted, ice sheets collapsed, and sea levels surged. Then, as abruptly as it began, the planet warmed again. Species vanished. Megafauna died en masse. Civilizations, if any existed, would have been obliterated. Something catastrophic had happened, fast. In the 1990s, scientists proposed a shocking hypothesis that a fragmenting comet struck the northern hemisphere around 10,800 BC, igniting continent-wide fires and triggering the climatic chaos that followed. Evidence now supports it. Beneath layers of Ice Age soil, researchers have found microspherules, nanodiamonds, and melted glass, materials that form only under extreme heat. They appear simultaneously in sites across North America, Europe, and the Middle East, including the region surrounding Egypt. In other words, the Earth was hit, and civilization, whatever form it took then, would not have survived unchanged. This cosmic event could explain everything the ancients tried to tell us. The destruction of Atlantis, the floods of Noah, the first time of Egypt, the memory of fire and water descending from the sky. It also explains something else, the erosion of the Sphinx. Geologist Robert Schoch was the first to notice that the Sphinx's body shows deep vertical fissures consistent with rainfall, not wind. The last time such rainfall drenched Giza was at the end of the Ice Age, precisely during the Younger Dryas. That means the Sphinx, and possibly the core of the Great Pyramid, existed before the desert itself. If the Sphinx stood before the last great flood, then Egypt's sacred plateau predates the pharaohs by millennia. And that changes everything. Imagine a civilization thriving before the cataclysm, one capable of measuring the earth, tracking the stars, and building monuments in stone. When disaster struck, its cities, likely built along ancient coastlines now drowned beneath the sea, vanished. Only the highland sanctuaries, the stone temples, the mountains of memory like Giza and Göbekli Tepe remained. The survivors, the gods, remembered in myth, carried fragments of that lost world's knowledge to new lands. Egypt, Sumer, the Andes. There they rebuilt, teaching the children of the new earth how to measure, how to align, how to remember. That is why civilization seems to begin suddenly around 5,000 years ago, not as invention, but as reconstruction. Humanity was recovering, not awakening. Even ancient calendars reflect this sense of rebirth. The Mayan long count begins around 3114 BC. The Sumerian king list speaks of kingship descending from heaven after the flood, and Egyptian records trace their lineage back to gods who reigned before catastrophe. Each culture seems to measure time from the same point, the return of civilization. But the Great Pyramid is different. Its geometry, its alignments, its silence, all point to something built to endure catastrophe, not merely remember it. It may have been a beacon, a message through time saying, "We were here, we survived, and you will too." In that sense, the Great Pyramid becomes not just a monument to an age that ended, but a memorial to resilience itself, the ultimate survival archive of a civilization erased by the cosmos. And perhaps that's why its design was mathematical, not linguistic, because mathematics is eternal. It doesn't depend on culture or translation or survival. It is the one language that endures through every age of fire and flood. If the builders knew a cataclysm was coming and built the pyramid to outlast it, then the Great Pyramid may be humanity's oldest time capsule. But if they left us a message, what does it say? What knowledge were they trying to preserve? To find that answer, we must return inside the pyramid itself, to the mysterious passageways and chambers whose dimensions and acoustics may hold the key to understanding its true purpose. The machine of immortality. Inside the Great Pyramid, sound behaves strangely. Whisper near the entrance, and the vibration seems to travel through the walls, bouncing back like an echo from another age. Clap your hands within the king's chamber, and the granite sings, a low, haunting resonance that lasts far longer than it should. Engineers and acousticians have measured this effect. The entire structure acts as a resonator, tuned to specific frequencies, most notably around 440 Hertz, the same tone modern instruments use as the key of A. Ancient Egyptian instruments discovered in tombs are tuned to that same pitch. Coincidence? Or evidence that the builders understood resonance as a form of power, sonic, energetic, perhaps even spiritual? What if the Great Pyramid wasn't a monument, but a machine? Its architecture suggests function. The descending passage dives deep into the bedrock, a narrow tunnel leading to the subterranean chamber, a place of darkness and compression. The ascending passage then climbs toward light, passing through the grand gallery, a vast, steep corridor whose shape and size amplify sound waves. At its peak lies the king's chamber, constructed entirely of red granite, a material rich in quartz crystal, the same mineral used today in electronics to convert vibration into energy. Quartz under pressure generates electricity through the piezoelectric effect. In other words, when sound or vibration moves through granite, it can create energy. The ancient builders might not have used it as we do, but they clearly understood its properties. Every chamber, passage, and vent seems calibrated to channel vibration, pressure, and resonance. Could the Great Pyramid have been designed to interact with the Earth itself? The structure sits on zones of geologic stress, places where natural vibrations from the planet's crust would constantly pulse upward. Modern experiments show that the pyramid's geometry amplifies these frequencies, creating standing waves within its chambers. To the ancients, these vibrations might have been the voice of the earth, the breath of the gods. But there's more. In the center of the king's chamber sits a lidless granite box, the so-called sarcophagus. It's the perfect size to hold a human body, but no mummies were ever found inside. When struck, the box emits a pure tone that resonates with the chamber around it, as though designed to harmonize with the pyramid itself. Was it an instrument, a vessel, a tool for transformation? Mystics throughout history have described the pyramid as a chamber of ascension, a place where consciousness could be amplified, projected, or reborn. The ancient Egyptians believed in a process called the opening of the mouth, a ritual that awakened the soul to eternity. Some researchers suggest the pyramid's acoustics could have been used to induce altered states of awareness, perhaps even to simulate the journey beyond death. To them, immortality was not about living forever, but about remembering forever, merging the self with the divine order of the cosmos. And the Great Pyramid, with its perfect mathematical harmony, might have been the ultimate symbolic and energetic gateway to that union. In this sense, it was indeed a machine of immortality, not one of metal and gears, but of stone and sound. It transformed vibration into experience, geometry into consciousness. The Greeks, when they encountered Egypt, called it the land of the temple of the world. They said its monuments preserved the science of eternal life. Perhaps they were right. The Great Pyramid might not have been built to serve a king, but to serve humanity as a perpetual teacher of resonance, harmony, and cosmic unity. Even modern experiments in the 21st century confirm that the pyramid focuses electromagnetic energy into its chambers and under its base. This is not pseudoscience. It's measurable physics. The shape itself interacts with energy in ways we still don't fully understand. Maybe the ancients didn't either, not in the modern sense, but they knew it worked. They knew geometry could bridge worlds, and that might be the deepest secret of all. That form is power, that by understanding the harmony of the universe, one could tune matter, life, and consciousness into the same vibration. If the Great Pyramid truly functioned as an ascension device, a bridge between the physical and the eternal, then its builders weren't architects of stone. They were engineers of spirit. And yet, such knowledge had to come from somewhere. Somewhere even older, even more advanced in its understanding of resonance and energy. If we follow that trail far enough back, beyond Egypt, beyond Atlantis, it leads to the stars themselves, the visitors from the sky. For as long as humans have looked upward, they have seen not just stars, but memory. Almost every ancient culture, no matter how distant or isolated, tells of a time when beings descended from the heavens, bringing knowledge, order, and the spark of civilization. To the Sumerians, they were the Anunnaki, those who came from the sky. To the Egyptians, they were the Neteru, divine intelligences embodied in the stars. To the Dogon of Mali, they were the Nomo, celestial teachers from Sirius. To the Maya, they were the Kukulkan, or Quetzalcoatl, feathered serpents who brought the calendar and the laws of creation. Different names, same story. And at the heart of these stories, one symbol keeps reappearing: the star. Not as a metaphor for heaven, but as a destination, a place of origin. In ancient Egyptian cosmology, the soul of the pharaoh was said to travel through Orion to join Osiris, the god of resurrection, and from there to Sirius, the star of Isis, the goddess of life and rebirth. The entire Giza complex reflects this journey. The three pyramids align with Orion's belt, while the Sphinx faces the rising of Sirius. It is a map not just of the sky, but of return. If the Great Pyramid was indeed built, or inherited, as a machine of immortality, then perhaps it was designed to resonate with the heavens, to connect the human spirit with its celestial origin. Its geometry is not just terrestrial, it is cosmic. But could there be something more literal in these stories? Archaeologists find depictions of winged beings, flying discs, and star glyphs across the ancient world. In Egypt, the hieroglyph Benben, the sacred capstone of creation, is described as a radiant object that descended from the sky in the time of the gods. It was said to shine with celestial fire and mark the place of the first temple. If this is myth, it's a persistent one. The same imagery appears in Mesopotamia, India, and Mesoamerica, beings descending on radiant vehicles, bringing knowledge, and then departing with the promise to return. Were these simply metaphors for enlightenment? Or were the ancients describing an encounter, one that seeded their civilization and inspired their greatest monuments? The Great Pyramid, with its celestial alignment, may have been more than a tomb or temple. It could have been a signal, a marker, or even a form of communication. Geometry scaled to planetary proportions, visible from the sky, built to last until whoever once watched over humanity could see it again. Its placement at the center of Earth's landmass, its perfect alignment, its mathematical constants, all suggest the work of minds that understood not only the Earth, but the relationship between Earth and the cosmos. Could the builders have been visitors? Not gods in the mystical sense, but explorers or emissaries from a civilization beyond our planet, a civilization so advanced that their technology appeared divine to early humanity? It's a possibility that even cautious researchers have begun to entertain. The Great Pyramid does not fit comfortably within the developmental arc of Bronze Age Egypt. Its precision surpasses what we would expect from a civilization just beginning to use metal tools. Its alignment, geometry, and resonance all point to an understanding of universal law, not local craftsmanship. Whether those laws were learned through revelation, inheritance, or direct contact, the result is the same. The pyramid stands as a testament to knowledge beyond its time. To the ancient Egyptians, this was never in doubt. They didn't claim to have invented their wisdom, they claimed to have received it from the gods, from the stars, from the first time. And so, perhaps the Great Pyramid was not built to call the gods down, but to call humanity back up, a reminder, carved in the most durable medium possible, that our origins might not be confined to this world. It's a breathtaking thought, one that forces us to reimagine our place in the universe. If the Great Pyramid was designed to bridge Earth and sky, then its true function may not be technological or funerary at all. It may be spiritual technology, a way of reconnecting humanity with its cosmic ancestry. And yet, like all inheritances, such knowledge can fade. Over time, the understanding of the pyramid's purpose may have been lost, its cosmic meaning buried under dynastic religion and ritual. What was once a living science became sacred mystery. Still, the structure remains, silent, enduring, waiting. Perhaps it was meant to awaken only when humanity looked back to the stars again, when we too were ready to remember. But even if the builders came from the heavens, the message they left behind was meant for Earth. For encoded within the pyramid's dimensions is not just knowledge of the cosmos, but of the planet itself, and perhaps a warning for its future, the warning in the stone. Every monument has a message, and sometimes the message is not remember us, but beware. The Great Pyramid may be more than a relic of lost science. It may be a chronometer, a silent record of Earth's great cycles of renewal and destruction. Ancient Egyptian priests spoke of time as circular, not linear. History to them was not a line but a wheel, an endless rotation of creation, order, chaos, and rebirth. They called these ages Zep Tepis, or first times, each one ending when balance, ma'at, was lost. And when chaos returned, the gods withdrew, and the world was cleansed by fire or flood. The same idea appears across the globe. The Hindu yugas, the Mayan suns, the Greek ages of man, all describe a repeating cosmic cycle in which humanity rises, falls, and is reborn. The details vary, but the rhythm is the same. Periodic cataclysms marking the reset of civilization. What if the Great Pyramid was designed to measure that cycle? Its geometry, some researchers suggest, encodes not just the dimensions of the Earth, but the measure of time itself. When the internal passages are mapped proportionally, inch to year, cubit to cycle, their lengths correspond eerily to major turning points in human history. The rise and fall of empires, even cataclysmic floods. The Grand Gallery, for example, can be interpreted as marking the ascent of civilization after a deluge, ending in the king's chamber, the apex of enlightenment, before descending again into darkness. Whether literal or symbolic, the implication is profound. The builders understood that history repeats. They knew that Earth is not a stable world, but a living system orbiting within a greater cosmic rhythm. The pyramid's precise alignment to the stars, its encoding of precessional numbers, 25,120 years, the length of one full wobble of Earth's axis, and its astronomical sight lines may all reflect a warning. When the stars return to the positions they held in 2500 BC, the cycle renews, and that cycle is returning now. Our own epoch coincides with the slow return of those ancient alignments. Orion once again rises where it did at the end of the last ice age. The same constellations that witnessed the Great Flood are climbing back into their former positions. The builders may have known that cosmic events, cometary debris, solar fluctuations, magnetic reversals, follow these cycles. They built their monument not just to remember the past, but to warn the future. The message, if read correctly, is simple. All that has happened before will happen again, but they also left hope. For just as destruction repeats, so does rebirth. The pyramid's shape, pointing upward, converging toward light, symbolizes resurrection, ascension, and renewal. It suggests that after every fall, there is another first time, another chance for civilization to remember what it once knew. The Egyptian priests hinted at this. When Solon asked them about the lost age of Atlantis, they told him, "There have been and will be many destructions of mankind. Yet they also said that each time a few are spared, those who preserve knowledge. Perhaps the Great Pyramid was built for those survivors, not of the past, but of the future. In that sense, it's not just a record. It's a survival manual written in universal language. Geometry. It teaches the laws of proportion, of harmony, of balance, the same principles that govern both the cosmos and the human spirit. If humanity can remember those laws, it can rebuild, as it has done before. The pyramid's orientation toward true north embodies this lesson. No matter how the sands shift, no matter how the ages turn, it always points to the same truth, the cosmic order that outlasts time. So maybe the Great Pyramid's warning isn't fear, but responsibility. It tells us that the universe moves in cycles, but awareness can break them, that by aligning ourselves with the same balance encoded in stone, we can rise above the chaos that once consumed our ancestors. In that light, the pyramid is not a relic of doom, but a beacon of continuity, a promise that what was lost can always be found again. But the question remains, who understood this message well enough to build it, and how could their knowledge have reached such perfection? The light within the stone. For thousands of years, sunlight has struck the Great Pyramid in silence, rising and setting, shifting its golden glow across the limestone faces. But beneath that daily rhythm lies a deeper truth. Light was the secret language of the builders. To the ancient Egyptians, light was life, the visible breath of divinity. The sun, Ra, was the eye of creation, the power that animated all things. But their priests also understood that light was not only illumination, it was information. It carried order through space, geometry through time. The Great Pyramid, oriented with microscopic precision to the cardinal points, is a physical manifestation of that philosophy, a monument of light geometry. Every angle, every shadow, every reflection was calculated to interact with the sun and stars in specific symbolic ways. At noon on the summer solstice, the pyramid casts almost no shadow at all, aligning perfectly with the zenith. At sunrise and sunset during the equinoxes, its shadows form exact triangles that mirror the golden ratio, the same ratio used throughout its architecture. These are not coincidences of design, they are deliberate calibrations. The pyramid speaks in light and shadow, marking time, season, and cosmic balance. Modern studies of the pyramid's reflective properties reveal that its original casing stones, highly polished white Tura limestone, would have reflected sunlight so brilliantly that it could be seen from miles away, perhaps even from orbit. Ancient texts refer to it as Iket, meaning the light. When complete, the Great Pyramid may have been the brightest structure on Earth, a beacon of reflected sunlight by day and moonlight by night. But light was not only external, it was internal. Within the dark chambers, light behaves differently. The granite of the king's chamber contains high concentrations of quartz, capable of refracting and amplifying light waves. If torches or crystal lamps were used, the chamber could have shimmered like a prism, converting sound vibrations, those same 440 Hz resonances, into subtle flashes of luminescence. In this way, light and sound worked together, vibration made visible, matter made radiant. To the ancients, this was not physics, it was alchemy. Light, in their philosophy, was the soul's true form. The pyramid texts describe the deceased pharaoh transforming into a shining one, a being of pure radiance joining the circumpolar stars. The geometry of the Great Pyramid may have been designed to replicate that transformation, to turn a mortal into light. Even the word pharaoh carries this symbolism. Derived from per-aa, meaning great house, it may originally have referred not to a ruler but to the structure itself, the great house of light, a temple where man became divine through understanding the order of the cosmos. Modern science now echoes this ancient intuition. Everything in the universe, from atoms to galaxies, vibrates and emits light, not always visible but measurable. The builders of Giza may have intuited this truth long before modern physics, that light and vibration are one, and that the structure of the universe can be mirrored through geometry. The pyramid's proportions, harmonizing P and F, square and circle, earth and sky, are the mathematical embodiment of that light. They translate cosmic harmony into physical form, turning energy into architecture. In that sense, the Great Pyramid isn't merely illuminated by the sun, it is the sun, frozen in geometry, the solid form of radiance. Some esoteric traditions claim that during certain alignments, light once entered the pyramid through polished crystal capstones and narrow shafts, creating a beam that illuminated the king's chamber. Whether literal or symbolic, the image is powerful. The light descending from the heavens, passing through layers of stone, focusing into a single point of illumination, like knowledge refracted through the ages. Perhaps that was the builder's intention, to remind future generations that enlightenment is not a gift, but a geometry. It must be built, aligned, and earned. If the Great Pyramid embodies light, then its ultimate message might be that humanity, too, is built of light, that our consciousness is not bound to the earth, but part of a greater radiance connecting all living things. When viewed in that way, the monument ceases to be a mystery of engineering and becomes a map of the soul, a stone mandala showing how energy ascends from density to brilliance, from matter to awareness. And that message, carved in limestone, encoded in vibration, was never meant for the dead. It was meant for us. But if light was the key, then something must have happened to dim it, a loss of alignment, both celestial and spiritual, that pushed the world into darkness. To understand how the ancient light was lost, we must follow the fall, the slow forgetting that turned a science of illumination into superstition. The fall into forgetting. Every civilization dreams of eternity. Yet eternity has a price, memory. The Great Pyramid was built to defy time, but humanity's understanding of it could not. Somewhere along the spiral of ages, the knowledge that gave birth to this monument began to fade, until even its builder's purpose was forgotten. How does a species forget its greatest secret? Not all at once. It begins with survival. After the great cataclysm, the survivors of the lost world, the ones who carried fragments of the old knowledge, faced an Earth reborn, but broken. The climate shifted, crops failed, populations scattered. What was once global unity dissolved into isolated tribes. The teachers of geometry and light became myths. Their sciences turned into symbols to be interpreted by priests, not practiced by scientists. What had once been sacred knowledge became religion. The rituals remained, but the reasons behind them faded. In Egypt, the followers of Horus passed their teachings into the early priesthood, encoding cosmic truths in mythic form. Osiris as the dying and resurrected sun, Isis as the creative womb of the cosmos, Horus as the reborn light. Geometry became theology, astronomy became astrology. The pyramid's proportions became symbols of divinity rather than instruments of science. Over time, that symbolic language hardened into doctrine. By the Middle Kingdom, the Great Pyramid's function was no longer understood. The people called it a tomb. For what else could a chambered mountain of stone be? The living science of resonance and alignment was replaced by ritual prayers for the dead. But something deeper was lost too, the sense of connection. The ancients once believed that the earth and heavens were one system, that to understand the cosmos was to understand oneself. When that belief collapsed, humanity began to see itself as separate, cut off from the divine order that once guided it. This was the true fall, not a moral one, but a loss of cosmic context. Mythologies across the world remember this moment in their own ways. In Sumer, it was the time when the gods withdrew from Earth. In the Hebrew scriptures, it was the expulsion from Eden, the separation from direct knowledge. In Greece, it was the passing of the Golden Age, when men no longer conversed with the immortals. All describe the same transition, the moment when humanity forgot that it was part of something vast and harmonious. Yet traces of the old science lingered, hidden in symbols, in mystery schools, in the quiet geometry of temples. The Hermetic texts attributed to the Egyptian sage Thoth, or Hermes Trismegistus, declared, "As above, so below, as within, so without." These words are not metaphor. They are a survival, a fossil of the same principle that governed the Great Pyramid. Through time, secret brotherhoods, the architects of ancient temples, the initiates of light, preserved fragments of that wisdom. The builders of Gothic cathedrals in medieval Europe used sacred geometry that mirrors the pyramid's proportions. Freemasonry, Rosicrucianism, and other esoteric traditions all trace their symbolic lineage to Egypt. In their rituals, they speak of rebuilding the Temple of Light, a metaphor perhaps for remembering what was lost. But for most of the world, the light went dark. The sands rose. The desert reclaimed the plateau. By the time the Greeks and Romans arrived, the Great Pyramid was already ancient, a mystery without memory. And yet the monument endured, silent, patient, waiting for the next awakening. That moment came again, briefly, during the Renaissance, when scholars rediscovered sacred geometry and sought to decode the harmony of the cosmos. The Great Pyramid inspired them once more, as if the old light flickered in their minds, urging humanity to remember. And now, in the modern era, as we rediscover quantum physics, vibration, and the nature of light itself, we find ourselves returning to the same realization that the universe is alive, harmonic, and intelligent, exactly as the ancients believed. Perhaps this is not coincidence. Perhaps the Great Pyramid's purpose was never to teach, but to remind, to survive the dark ages of forgetting and reignite the flame when the world was ready. That moment may be now. Because as we rediscover what the builders knew, that energy, matter, and consciousness are one, we begin to awaken to the very truth they tried to preserve. The Great Pyramid, once a silent riddle, becomes a mirror, reflecting our own journey from darkness back into light. But memory always comes with choice. Once we remember who we were, we must decide who we will become. And in that choice lies the true inheritance of the pyramid. Not a secret of the past, but a path for the future. The mirror of humanity. The Great Pyramid does not move, yet it changes everyone who stands before it. It is not just a monument to history, it is a mirror, and what it reflects is humanity itself. At first glance, it's a masterpiece of engineering. Perfect angles, colossal stones, precision beyond its age. But the longer you look, the more it seems alive, responding not just to the sun and stars, but to the consciousness of those who contemplate it. It's as though the structure was designed to hold up a cosmic mirror and ask a single, timeless question. Do you remember who you are? Because in every sense, the Great Pyramid is human. Its proportions reflect the shape of the earth we stand upon. Its angles echo the motion of the heavens we gaze into, and its geometry mirrors the very mathematics encoded in our DNA, our perception, our breath. It is both the world outside and the world within. The ancients may have known this. Their texts never describe the pyramid as an object. They speak of it as a being, a living temple that opens the way for the soul. The pyramid was not built to glorify the gods. It was built to remind humans that they too are divine, extensions of the same geometric order that governs the universe. If the Great Pyramid was inherited, perhaps it was built long ago by people who understood that truth and wanted us to rediscover it. Maybe their greatest fear wasn't extinction, but amnesia. They saw how cycles of catastrophe erased not only civilizations, but consciousness, how each age had to rediscover what it meant to be human. And so they encoded the answer in stone, a mathematical and spiritual message immune to fire, flood, and time. Every element of the pyramid's design reflects this philosophy of unity. Its square base represents the material world, stability, the four directions, the body. Its four sides converge to a single point, spirit, the singular source of all. Together they form the bridge between heaven and earth, matter and consciousness. the many and the one. It is the same principle mirrored in ourselves, 4 limbs and a single mind, flesh reaching upward toward light. The pyramid is us, perfected, eternal, remembering. That is why it speaks to everyone, from scientist to mystic, skeptic to believer. Each sees in it what they carry within. The rational mind sees mathematics. The seeker sees transcendence. Both are right because both are halves of the same equation. The Great Pyramid doesn't demand worship. It demands reflection. It asks us to see that what we call divine is simply the highest expression of what we already are. It suggests that evolution is not just biological but spiritual, a process of remembering the harmony we once lived in. And in our modern age, this reflection feels almost prophetic. For as technology reconnects us across the planet, as our instruments map the stars and our minds explore consciousness itself, we find ourselves standing once again on the same threshold the builders once knew. Between knowing and forgetting, between unity and division, they stood there too, and they built a mirror large enough to survive until we reached that same point again, so that when we were ready to look, we would see not them, but ourselves. The Great Pyramid, in this sense, is not just evidence of an ancient inheritance. It is the inheritance, a message from the past to the future, written in the most enduring language possible, form. It says, "You are not separate. You are not small. You are part of the geometry of the cosmos. Build in harmony, live in proportion, and you will endure as we did." Perhaps that's why standing before it still moves people to silence. The stones do not speak, but something deep within us answers. We recognize the pattern, the same one in our heartbeat, in the spiral of galaxies, in the pulse of creation itself. The pyramid is not a relic of forgotten gods. It is a reminder that humanity itself was once divine and can be again. But if that's true, then the next question is inevitable. What do we do with this knowledge? If the pyramid is a mirror, how do we reflect it forward? How do we build the next monument, not of stone, but of consciousness? The next pyramid. The Great Pyramid has stood for over 4,000 years, maybe longer, defying wind, war, and time. Yet its truest legacy isn't behind us. It's ahead, because monuments are never only about the past, they are blueprints for the future. The builders of Giza left us more than a riddle of stone. They left a template for civilization, for consciousness, for creation itself. And now, in our own age of rediscovery, we are beginning to build again, not in limestone, but in energy, knowledge, and awareness. In a way, humanity is constructing a new pyramid, invisible but real, a structure made of communication, technology, and collective consciousness. Every satellite orbiting the planet, every line of code, every mind connected across oceans adds another layer to it. It rises not from the desert, but from the digital ether, aligning not to the stars, but to the light of information. This, too, is a pyramid, the pyramid of mind. Like the one at Giza, it has a base, our material world, our shared earth, and a point, the unity of thought and purpose that transcends all borders. We are rebuilding the ancient geometry, but this time from the inside out. And yet, the same question faces us now that faced the builders then. Will we build in harmony or in hubris? The first civilization may have perished not because of ignorance, but because of imbalance, because it forgot that technology without wisdom is chaos. The Great Pyramid encoded that lesson in geometry, proportion, symmetry, balance. It teaches that knowledge must rise in harmony with conscience, that every ascent must converge toward unity, not division. Perhaps that's why it has endured so long, to remind us at precisely this moment in history how to build wisely again. Our tools are different: quantum physics, artificial intelligence, exploration beyond Earth. But the principles are the same. To master the world, we must first master ourselves. When we study the pyramid's precision, we are reminded that order is not imposed. It's discovered. The same laws that bind stone to stone bind star to star and mind to mind. The builders knew this. They worked with nature, not against it. They built in resonance with Earth's field, in alignment alignment with the heavens, in reflection of the self. If the Great Pyramid is the first message, maybe our task is to write the second. To construct a new monument, not of stone, but of awareness, that can carry forward the lessons of balance, light, and remembrance. And perhaps that monument isn't physical at all. Perhaps it's the human being, when consciousness is fully awake, balanced between heaven and earth, flesh and light. A living pyramid. Every person who seeks truth, who aligns action with compassion, who builds rather than destroys, becomes a block in that new structure. And just as the ancient pyramid was designed to channel energy upward, our civilization must do the same, directing knowledge, art, and science toward unity, not power. In this sense, the Great Pyramid is both prophecy and mirror. It reflects where we've been and reveals where we're going. The ancients may have known that one day, long after their stones began to crumble, humanity would once again reach upward, toward the same stars, the same knowledge, the same cosmic harmony. That moment is now. We are once again aligning heaven and earth through space exploration, quantum discovery, and the awakening of consciousness. We are, whether we realize it or not, completing what they began. Perhaps this is what the inheritance truly means. Not that we received their stones, but their mission. To remember that we are builders, creators, keepers of light. When the Great Pyramid finally erodes into dust, its geometry will still exist. Not on the desert plateau, but within us. Because the real pyramid was never just stone. It was an idea that order, beauty, and spirit can coexist, and that creation itself is sacred. So maybe the next pyramid will not be a monument at all. Maybe it will be a world, a civilization built upon balance, resonance, and light. And just as the old one pointed to the stars, the new one will point to something greater still, the awakening of humanity to its own divine design. But even in awakening, there must be humility, for the same cycles that lifted the ancients can turn again. The final lesson of the pyramid is not pride, but remembrance, that knowledge without reverence will always bring the stones down. The eternal monument night falls over Giza. The crowds are gone, the air stills, and the horizon glows faintly with the last breath of the sun. And there it stands, the Great Pyramid, as it has for uncounted centuries, its edges catching the light of the stars that have watched it since the world was young. It doesn't need to speak. Its presence is its message. Even now, as satellites orbit above and telescopes reach for galaxies, this single structure remains the most eloquent expression of humanity's question. Who are we? Where did we come from? Why are we here? Every stone of the Great Pyramid answers, not in words, but in form, through balance, precision, and silence. It reminds us that truth doesn't always shout. Sometimes it waits, immovable, until we are quiet enough to listen. Its mystery has endured because it was designed to, not to keep secrets, but to keep them safe, until a time when we could read them without fear or superstition. Maybe that time is now. The archaeologist sees engineering. The mystic sees divinity. The skeptic sees coincidence. But the pyramid itself sees all of them. It doesn't divide truth by belief. It contains it, because the monument was never about who built it. It was always about who would understand it. Perhaps that's why it feels alive, even now, because it reflects the consciousness that observes it. It grows with every question, shines with every doubt, awakens with every generation that dares to look deeper. It is the one teacher humanity cannot outgrow. When the wind sweeps through its empty corridors, you can almost hear the breath of ages, a whisper older than Egypt itself. As above, so below. As within, so without. Those words are the key, the eternal equation of the pyramid. They tell us that the geometry of the stars is the geometry of the soul, that what we build outside mirrors what we are inside. The Great Pyramid was never simply inherited or constructed. It was remembered, drawn from a universal memory that transcends civilizations. Its builders, whoever they were, tapped into something timeless, the pattern that underlies all things, the language of harmony itself. And perhaps that's why it still stands when everything else has fallen. It is built on truth, and truth does not decay. Someday its stones will weather and crumble. The desert will reclaim them, the sand will rise, and the last traces of its physical form will vanish. But what it means will remain, because meaning cannot die. The Great Pyramid's true structure is invisible, woven into the human spirit, built anew every time a person seeks understanding. We are the continuation of its design. Every act of creation, every pursuit of knowledge, every moment of awe adds another invisible layer to that eternal monument. The pyramid is not finished. We are still building it. And so, as the stars wheel overhead and the night deepens, the Great Pyramid keeps watch, guardian of memory, monument of light, mirror of eternity. It whispers to those who will listen, "We were here before you, as you will be after us. The stars are your ancestors, the earth your foundation, and light your inheritance. Build wisely, for you are the architects of forever." And then, silence. The sands shift, the wind returns, the pyramid endures. It has no beginning and no end, only the endless echo of its purpose, to remind us that we, too, are eternal. The circle closes the Great Pyramid of Giza, evidence, perhaps, that it was not built by those we think, but inherited from an age when humanity still remembered the stars. A gift from a forgotten world to the one still awakening, a geometry of remembrance written in stone, waiting for us to read its light. And as long as it stands, the story continues, not of the past, but of the destiny that began when we first looked upon it and wondered, what if it was never meant to be understood, but remembered?